Congregational Church, 14 Wattaquatic Hill Road.
Thank you, members of the board. My name is Greg Roy with Ducharme Dillis. Is this the best place to present?
That's fine. That's fine. Sure.
I'm here representing, as you mentioned, Trinity Church, and I am here with a few representatives. Tim Joyner, who's the groundskeeper, Dan Williams, who's representative of the House Committee, Jim Byler, who's representative of Trinity Church, Elder Board. Also Clyde Wheeler is with us. BJ is here too. I don't know if you're here because of this or because something else. Thank you for your time this evening. I think you have a pretty full agenda, so I'll try to get through this as quickly as possible and have time to answer any of your questions or any questions from the audience. Trinity Church at 14 Wattaquatic Hill Road. Just for reference, Wattaquatic Hill Road is shown on this plan right here. This would be the public safety facility. This is Memorial Field, and 1417 is right here with the new common right across the street. The existing parking area is shown here on this aerial that's shown in gray with a dash line outline. It's in significant need of update. It's kind of it's very old. It was done a number of decades ago. There's quite a bit of broken pavement there, and it's becoming difficult for the church to maintain, particularly in the winter. And in the spring months when it's wet, it's starting to get pretty chewed up. So they would like to resurface the parking area, and they contacted us because they also wanted to look to see if they could get some more efficiency out of the space, because currently the width sort of doesn't quite work for 3 bays of parking. It's sort of an extra wide aisle in the middle, and there's some wasted space. So we're actually proposing a modest expansion to improve that efficiency a little bit. So the dark line here would be the superimposed over the area would be what we're proposing to construct. The plans we submitted, I don't know if you have these, but I've colored up a more detailed site plan. This shows what we're proposing to do. In gray would be the newly paved area. We would be preserving the access road, the emergency access road that cuts through to the Florence Sawyer School Road from Everson to Florence Sawyer. That would be preserved, unchanged. No change to the entrances. It would really just be focused on that lower parking area. There's an existing swale system in here between the church building and the parking area that handles the drainage for the parking area. We're going to maintain that for a portion of the resurfacing. We're going to pitch the parking area so that roughly the same amount, a little bit less actually, will continue to flow to the swale, and then the newer sections of pavement will flow to a newer stormwater management area, which we'll be constructing right in this area here. We are also proposing to maintain the connection. There's a sort of a ad hoc walkthrough that connects Memorial Field to this parking area that's used quite a lot. We're not proposing any change to that. There is quite a bit of I think that the church notices quite a bit of use for that, and they sort of don't object to that. I mean, it's sort of been a mutual relationship over the years, and we're not proposing any change to that situation. That's the bulk of the project. We do have a concurrent Conservation Commission filing. We need an order of conditions. We were hopeful to have that process significantly underway, but they're having trouble with quorum, so we haven't been before them yet, but we expect to be before them in the next couple of weeks. They don't know when the next quorum is going to be, so we're not sure when that's going to be yet. And then the planning board was nice enough to issue their recommendation last night, which we don't have any issues with. So if there's any particular questions on that, I'm happy to take them, or if you have any others. That's all.
Can the planning board mentions infiltration basins? Can you show me where those are?
Sure. So the new one we're proposing is right in here.
Okay.
And really what we're doing is, there's a dash line right down the parking area here. That's going to be a high point.
Mhm.
So we're going to regrade this so that this area here will flow, as it always has, to the swale. This area here will flow into this swale and then into this infiltration basin there, and then out that way.
So there was a note about the lights, and I just want to confirm that those are going to be full cutoff
Yes.
you're introducing?
Yep. Will be
Okay.
a full cutoff, dark sky compliant
Okay.
light fixture.
And then one of the issues is to create the retention basin, you're going to be clearing a lot. And so the planning board recommended plantings. But if everybody looks, if you could show everybody the retention basin, how
Right in here. Will be
that's like a wet forested area right now, so that's all going to be disturbed. So I'm just wondering, is there a planting plan for after construction?
The Conservation Commission has also expressed that, and there's approximately it's kind of brushy in there. Really, there's a lot of small lower story vegetation, but there are some more significant trees that will come out, I think, and we are obligated to show those on the plan. I told the Conservation Commission we would get those on the plan because they really wanted to see those. There's 5 to 6 of them in there, in the area that we'd be disturbing, that would have to be removed, and we plan to mitigate them with additional plantings. So we would probably have to disperse them around the site a little bit, not in the basin. But we do plan to revegetate and mitigate for the trees that we're taking down. There's nothing that I haven't gone out there to send the survey crew out there yet to locate those, but I think we're in the 12-inch or less caliber range, so we're not talking a huge tree that's coming down. There are some more significant trees right along the property line that are going to stay. We're not proposing to touch those, so I think you'll still see there'll still be a buffer between Memorial Field.
So then you're committed to like a revegetation plan for?
Yeah, like we propose whatever the Conservation Commission is comfortable with, but typically it's a 1-to-1. If we take out a tree, we'll put back another tree of a shade tree to replace it.
And what type of plants can you plant in a retention basin?
Well, I can't really put them in the basin. That's what I said. I think we'll have to find some areas that are acceptable with the Conservation Commission around the site. So we'll probably be looking at more like up towards the. I'm probably thinking somewhere closer to the parking area. So maybe something in there, Jonathan. Maybe we're kind of looking at more like a parking lot tree type configuration. So we have over time we develop some shade for the parking area too. So it's kind of a nice benefit.
And how is the grade, the existing grade, is that coming up?
Not appreciably. It's really, we actually have decent existing grade across there. It's just sort of over the years, it's just kind of done this. So we're going to just be taking that out. So generally speaking, the site slopes from Waterquatic Hill Road back this way, and then also slightly from here to here. We're just going to be in the middle. We're going to be raising that a little bit. There's nothing more than, I'd say, 6 inches. It really worked out pretty well. It just needs to be regraded, and of course, paving it will help us to maintain those. We won't have the same problem with snow plows taking the, kind of giving it divoting it up in the wintertime.
And then, so there was another point about providing, designating a place for snow removal that wasn't in the wetland.
Yeah, and we'll work with them on that, with the Conservation Commission. Currently what happens now, I've had the benefit of actually plowing this from time to time, so what happens now is you come in and you sort of make a pass, and you open this area up, and you push, a lot of the snow kind of gets pushed up in here, and then you end up making passes down this way, so a lot of the snow actually ends up down in this area too. And then some of it also ends up in this area. So we'll work with the Conservation Commission to make sure that if they have some critical areas where they do not want to see snow storage, that we get those identified. They're going to issue an order of condition. We need an order of conditions for this, and they have the ability to, as well as your board, but The Conservation Commission has the ability to issue some conditions and sort of run with the property. So, you know, we'll commit to work with them on that. Or if your board feels there needs to be a condition on that, we're happy to accept that as well.
Well, I reviewed the plans, I'm fine with the plans, I'm fine with what the planning board has come up with, their recommendations. I agree that the plan should be approved, so, I mean, I have no issue with this, it's fine. You're not doing anything substantially different. You know, we're not talking about spotted turtles and salamanders and that kind of stuff, so I think this is all fine.
Is there any comments from the audience?
I'd like to make my comment after this session has been closed.
Okay.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Well, excuse me, I think if this session is closed, then we're going to be done with this, so
That's fine.
There won't be any comments regarding this if we're on to the next topic.
I understand that.
So if you want to make a comment, you should make it now. Otherwise, we're going to move on to the next topic, and it's not appropriate to have a comment on something we
Maybe I'll just give you a call.
Okay. Anytime, Martha.
Yeah, thanks.
So I'd just like to say, you know, I would prefer that we had the approvals from the planning board, which you have, and the Conservation Commission, because I think sometimes when we vote ahead of them, you know, they feel kind of pressured. So, but, so that's just a matter of, you know, practice, but, you know, I think, you know, I'm open to approving this on the condition, you know, on the condition of, you know, the Conservation Commission being satisfied with, you know, the plans and, you know, any changes that they recommend.
I mean, I don't necessarily have a problem with that, but this is not a vote where we have the superseding vote. We're one of a number of boards and committees reviewing this, so, you know, we can vote, and the Conservation Commission has to vote, but that's there. So this is not like, you know, it's almost arrogant that we're, you know, making our vote contingent on anything else because everyone gets an equal vote, but.
Well, we don't have a problem either way. We can't build the project without, as you said.
Oh, exactly,
without
exactly.
both of them. So either way is fine.
So I mean, yeah, our vote should stand
Yeah.
whether we approve it or not, and then whether the Conservation Commission approves it or not, or approves it without the conditions, that's their business, not, you know, we don't have a say in what conditions that they come up with, so.
Well, my point of view is that the site plan review is the way of the selectmen putting on the brakes if other committees have, you know, have approved something, and then there's an uproar about that. It gives the selectmen a chance to kind of focus in on the project, respond to feedback, and be the final vote. But yeah,
Then let's not vote on it at all.
Okay.
But I mean, if you want to make it contingent on that, that's fine. You make the motion.
I'd like to make a motion that we approve the site plan based on the full approval of the Conservation Commission.
So moved.
All in favor, say aye.
All right.
Aye.
Thank you very much, gentlemen.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
Next, we have a request from the Historic Commission to place a plaque on the Wilder Road culvert to commemorate its construction in 1825.
Martha, how are you today?
It's been a horrendous day. Computer problems and humidity, but I'm here. Thank you for asking.
Tomorrow's Friday.
Yeah, right. Yes, gentlemen, during the reviews of the redo for the Wilder culvert, it was finally realized that Esther Whitcomb's book mentioned that it was built in 1825. So the Historical Commission thought that perhaps it might be nice to have a plaque near the site as you approached it somehow, because there are guardrails right next to it, that would call attention to the fact that it isn't really visible from the road, but it's an important construction that actually fixed that ravine, so you didn't go all the way down and all the way up. So we had some draft wording put together, and we would have a plaque that was approximately this size. And it would be on the flat side of a rock, similar to the potash plaque down at the safety building. And of course, these things take a lot of time. And this is just the first draft that Commissioner Bush drew up, to call attention to the fact that it only cost $530, but back in 1825, it was a sizable amount of money. And that SVS Wilder was the road commissioner, and it was built by this person.
I think that's a great idea.
And just that it was rebuilt in this year.
Yeah, I think that's a great idea.
And this would be in our budget. And we will, as we get closer to it, if there are other things we need to come and see you about, like I had written a letter to retired DPW Director Brown about if they could find a rock. I mean, there are plenty of rocks around. We were hoping there might be some left in construction, but you can't really see them. They're all in the ravine, but we'll arrange all of that. And if we need to come, we'd like to actually have your opinion about where it would be placed. West of the 101 Wilder Road, Wilder Mansion, there are common driveways that go down. There's one that goes actually to a public access for the dam on the Goose Pond, the Wilder Pond. And then down at the next common driveway, there are areas there. We'd have to clear it with DPW as far as plowing and things to have the rock, so that it would be beneficial for public to look at, but not be in the way.
Sure.
And at first I thought of the pond access, it might be a little too far away, so we might have something that said at the bottom of the hill or something, you know, to show that it was down there. Because that's really where only public would go, would be perhaps to that conservation area down that common road.
Sure, no, I think it's a great idea. I think it's
All right, well, that's very nice, thank you.
Do you need, so do you need an approval from us?
No, we always ask you about things like this because after all, you're the final word about what things happen. And I believe we mentioned about the pot, we've always had this custom that we would let you know before things were disturbed and rocks were moved and.
Well, it probably wouldn't hurt just to take a quick vote to say it's.
Just a memorialize it.
Yeah, so I'll make a motion that we approve the request from the Historical Commission to place a plaque on Wilder Road to commemorate the 1825 culvert.
Second.
And the rebuild.
And the rebuild.
Thank you very much.
All those in favor say aye.
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 Thanks, Martha.
Thank you. We have two sign requests. The first is a sign for 592 Sugar Road. It's being Nicole, would you like to come on up?
Sure. Is that, would
Yep,
you prefer me to come up?
Yep,
Sure,
please
come on
up.
down.
Hi.
Hi,
We
I'm
haven't
Nicole
met.
LeBlanc.
Jonathan
Nice to
Keith.
meet you.
Stand one side. Nice to meet you.
Nice to meet you. Thank you.
So you're a photographer?
I'm a photographer. I own the
Yep.
Petite Studio Photography. We just moved to town from Northborough. I rent studio space in Northborough, and I have home office and a home occupation there too. So a lot of my clients meet me there for consultations. We'll do sittings there, and we meet there, and then we kind of go to fields and parks and family portraits and apple orchards and stuff like that. So I'm looking to put a sign at the end of my driveway, which I think you have the pictures.
Yeah, we do.
And you'll see there's a post there at the end of the driveway. I was hoping to hang it on that, but put wood around it and then, you know, hang it there. And that's
So it wouldn't
really.
be leaning against the
It would not
post,
be
it would
leaning,
up
no,
on an-
it would be hanging,
This is just
yeah,
to show scale.
exactly.
Okay.
And I think I can go 10 feet from the road, is that correct? What I was,
I think so.
yeah,
Should double check, but I think that's correct.
yeah.
So it's a 20-inch diameter circle.
20, exactly, and it didn't print out
That's
the phone number and everything on the
Okay.
bottom.
Yeah.
There are 3-inch letters on the bottom
Yep. Okay.
and top,
Okay.
and the logo is in the middle with an L there.
Okay.
I'm good with that?
You
Have
good with
talked-
that?
Have you talked to the building inspector to get the permit and all
Yes.
that good stuff?
Mike was fine with it.
Cool.
So the next thing that Nicole would do is get a building permit.
Okay, sounds like a plan to me, works for me.
Okay, wonderful. And I noticed the sign said something about no sign shall be internally lit, meaning backlit. Does that mean
It's like
I
those
can't
gas
put-
station signs. that
Right.
are
Right, illuminated from
middle.
inside. You can
Right.
certainly shine a light on
I
it.
can shine a light up, like two solar lights that
Yeah,
come down
yeah.
on each side of it?
Yep.
Okay, okay.
That's fine.
All right,
That works.
perfect. That's it?
Okay, I'll make a motion to approve the sign at 529 Sugar Road.
Second,
It's 592, actually.
592.
Yeah,
second, all those in favor say aye.
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 Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Nicole.
Welcome to
Thank you very
town.
much, thank you.
Congratulations, good luck.
I appreciate it.
I hope you're enjoying your historic home.
Not historic, no.
592, right
Yeah.
across from the Whitney Homestead?
No, I don't think so.
Really?
I think it was built in '84.
It was built in 84, 19.
Oh, I'm
Oh,
sorry.
we're 2 houses down the street from there.
From the one on the opposite
Yes.
side.
So we have a
Sorry.
second request for a sign at
Thank you.
727 Main Street.
Come on down.
Robin Bonzola.
How are you?
Hello.
Hi.
Stan Wysocki, nice
Hi.
to meet you.
Hi.
Robin,
Hi, how are
Jonathan
you?
Keith, nice to meet you. Hello,
Hi, I'm Leslie.
Leslie.
Stan Wysocki, nice to meet you.
So, I have a business now at 563 Main Street, the Bolton Corners building,
Mhm.
and there's a sign with many businesses on it, and in the last 12 years, I've had only one person come from that sign. You know, you ask people when they come. So I was hoping that I could put a colonial-looking sign, you know, with the dimensions that you specify in front of my home, maybe attached to the old-fashioned lamppost, but it doesn't have to be. So, you know, it'd be something very simple. This isn't necessarily the, you know, the font.
Mm-hmm.
So your sign at Bolton Corners, is it on the main side?
It's on the main, and I'm in the center of it,
Okay.
and, you know,
Mhm.
other people have said the same thing, that, you know, nobody sees their, you know, people in the building have said that,
Mhm.
you know, your business isn't seen there, other than people who are already planning. You know, they know that they're coming, and so
Mm-hmm.
they're looking for you.
Mhm. So by colonial, what do you mean, and what are the colors? Just like black and white?
I hadn't really thought about it, but probably not black and white. I mean, I would think maybe, you know, a pale yellow with blue, or I don't know, something that would, you know, would be very tasteful. And, you know,
Match the
'cause it-
neighborhood. and-
Yeah,
The house
you
is
know,
a
I
dream.
mean, I could have something designed and send it, you know, send it to you.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think there's gonna be any problem at all, but it would be nice to see.
Of course,
Um,
of course.
See what you're
Well, my
doing.
question is, okay, is your business at 727?
My business is not at 727, it's at 563.
Okay, 563, and then you want this at?
At 727 where I live on Main Street.
Okay. Okay.
But it would be simple and pretty, and, you know, I thought maybe, you know, 3 barn boards or something that work
Mhm.
together, and off-white or pale yellow or something of that sort, so that it looks really,
Mhm.
yeah.
Now, what has been our sort of position on a sign at a residence where the business is not at that residence?
Well, we spoke with Mike,
Mhm.
and he said that there's nothing in the bylaws that prohibit it.
Okay.
And it's up to the selectmen to,
Okay.
selectmen have jurisdiction to approve it if you wish.
Okay. Oh, well, I think certainly helping out a business in town, I'm fine with that.
So then I should design something, and then I should,
Yeah, if you
should
could
it, I have
design
a picture
something.
taken and then email it to you? Is that the best way to do it?
I would say so, we could do it that. We just like to see
Okay.
something, what closer, what it's gonna look like,
Okay.
but overall, I'm fine with that.
Okay,
Yeah.
great.
That'd be great.
Is it possible, you know, just to get all these letters in, is it possible to do 30 inches
And make
this
it
way,
narrow,
and
make it
back.
wider and narrower
Just
to
by the
fit
dimensions a little
the
bit,
2
or-
feet by 2 feet?
Is-
Do you
I
do
think it's,
that?
I,
3,
I think it's a square foot issue, isn't it?
it is, the largest sign one can have, I believe, is 32
You
square
have
feet.
bylaw right there, right?
Okay,
Oh,
so
it's 32. Okay, I was told 24.
Okay,
Well,
so
it's a square foot thing, so I don't.
okay, so it doesn't have to be 2 feet by 2 feet. It can be long and just.
It can be rectangular, as
Okay,
long as it doesn't
okay,
exceed the
good.
overall dimension.
Okay,
Yeah,
great.
yeah,
Well, thank you so much.
super, well,
Thank you for coming.
give us a design and
Okay,
we'll be
good.
good to go.
All right. So sorry that I didn't come.
Oh,
this
no, that's
time.
okay, no,
Okay,
no, that's fine,
Perfect.
that's fine.
Okay,
Yeah.
so that means I come back again. with
Sure,
the- Okay,
yeah.
all right.
Our
okay.
next meeting is September 28th, if that helps you at all.
I'm away teaching on the 28th.
Or could we just send a picture, or is that?
Or should I wait until, when is the one after that?
I think you could send a picture and we'll.
Let's send a picture, and if we need to have you come in, then.
Okay.
Well, what,
All right.
well, how
I'll
about,
send a picture in the Linda.
Send.
well, the thing is, do
okay.
we want
Yeah,
to
yes,
approve this conditional on seeing,
Just sign
because this way they don't have to
on
come
the
back again?
Yes.
Well, they wouldn't necessarily, I mean, they could have the picture, you could do it a couple ways. You could approve it conditional on Jonathan and you approving the picture, or you could just say submit the picture, we could have a 5-minute issue on the next agenda.
Oh, that's fine, yeah.
They
All
wouldn't necessarily have to come.
right, then we'll do it that way,
Okay.
yeah. Just get us a
Okay.
picture, we'll vote on it next time.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Have a nice
Thank you,
evening.
Linda.
Yep, thank you.
We have an update on Camp Virginia.
Ken, come on down. How are you this evening?
Not too bad. I have a handout, would you like one?
Thank you, Ken.
Okay, so what I want to try to do is amplifying on what Don reported last week and update some things that have happened this week, and also to clear up some of the things that have been in the paper recently that may or may not have been correct in the way that they related to things. So the first thing I wanted to mention is that there are 2 appraisals on the property. One was done for the Girl Scouts and the other was done for the town. They both had highest and best use of A&R house lots on common driveways. In the case of the towns, one of them had 10 lots, the other one had 11 lots, and that partly accounts for the difference in the values of the two, 1.14 for the town and 1.45 for the Girl Scouts. There's some other, and then the other thing that really accounted for the difference is that our appraiser assumed that there would need to be an A&R lot where the cell tower is, even though they're retaining the cell tower. Her judgment was that you would want to have a buildable lot around it. The Girl Scouts just cut out a half acre and then left the rest of the land. So there is a difference in the price, and this is something which, when we last talked with the representative from the Girl Scouts, she agreed that she would come out sometime in mid to late October, sit down with whomever she needed to sit down with, and work out the difference in the prices. Now, important to the town, obviously, and to all of this, was the grant. And so you folks agreed to apply for a grant. There was a vote on that back in April or May. That was officially submitted on July 11th. And I just wanted to mention a few things about it because they're kind of important to understand, because it drives the timeline and a lot of other things having to do with it. And to give credit where credit is due, the application was prepared largely by Ashley Davies of Sudbury Valley Trustees. And interestingly, she had her baby on July 11th. So right at the time of that actually was 2 weeks early. But in any case, they got input from our working group, but Sudbury Valley did a great job in putting together the package. So the grant will reimburse 56% of the town's purchase price up to $400,000. So what that means is that that we would actually, if we get the grant, we would actually receive the $400,000 because the estimated cost that we have after, if some lots are sold, is under $800,000. And so 56% of 776 in this case is more than 400,000. And so, so in some sense, it doesn't really matter in the end how much of the property the town ends up, I mean, whether, for example, whether the town bought the all the extra land around the cell tower or 2 additional lots, they would still receive the grant. The grant requires a conservation restriction. That's in there from the state's point of view so that a town doesn't turn around and sell it for development or whatever it might be. And so in this case, sort of as the quid pro quo for their having prepared the package, Sudbury Valley would be the holder of that conservation restriction. Now, the grant requires public access, but I would point out that almost all the past purchases of open space that Bolton has done, particularly any that have involved state funding, which when you go back to the early days of the Lime Kiln or Bower Springs or Vaughan Hills, any of those where there was state money, that requires public access as well. And really, in Bolton, open space has meant public access. And so, so it really should not be an issue whether somebody from Hudson or Harvard or anywhere else comes to our property to enjoy what's there. And with the state paying 56% potentially of the cost, it's not unreasonable that would be something that would need to be able to be done. So I mean, you know, there's a philosophical thing there, but I mean, I think in past practice from the point of view of the town, it's never been in dispute and it's never been a problem. I mean, we've never had any problems on conservation. We've generally not on any open spaces anyway, and when we have, it hasn't. You can't single out people from any particular place if and when there have been any problems that have occurred. Now, the grant application excluded 2 building lots. So what we did is take the town's appraisal, the plan that was drawn for that had the A&R lots, and designated one of those lots on Hudson Road, closest to the driveway, to be a house lot to be sold, and then one on Long Hill Road, because as you may know, the property goes across the back, abutting the Wilson property, and comes out on Long Hill Road, has about 350 feet of frontage, and so a lot would be cut off there. They were excluded from the application. No, they weren't excluded from the appraisal. You could buy them anyway if you wanted to, but from the point of view of the grant application, they were left out, which allows us to sell them. And the Girl Scouts agreed that 2 lots could be sold to do that. Now, the Conservation Trust is willing to assist in the mechanics of that sale. Now, there was some discussion of whether the town wanted to do it. Our assumption from the beginning in this was that the town didn't want to be in the real estate business and that the whole thing would be done more smoothly if the town only dealt with what it was going to end up owning and somebody else took care of the sale of the house lots. That still can be changed. It doesn't make any difference, but I heard an assertion this week that the grant application was done incorrectly and therefore no lots could be sold, and that isn't true. It was drawn that way, and in fact, the A&R lot around the cell tower was also excluded from the grant application, and that's why the grant application was actually for about 51 acres rather than 56, 60, whatever the true number is that Camp Virginia is these days. So anyway, so that's kind of the background on that, and on the the hope to be able to sell 2 lots. And so just as an order of magnitude, so if you accept one of the appraisals of the 1-1 or the 1-3 or 1-4, take off approximately $400,000 for 2 lots, if that's what the appraiser said it could bring. That brings you down then to something around $800,000, $400,000 for the grant, and the town would end up, in the end, paying around $375,000 to $400,000 for the property. We had an open house in July, about 100 people attended that. The working group now has set up a website, campvirginiabolton.org, that has photographs on it, and has a number of frequently asked questions on there, and ways to contact and things of that sort. This past week, the Girl Scouts started work on some logging on the property against an approved forest management plan. We had been assured last Wednesday that that was not going to interfere with the open house that we had planned for September 9th, but that turned out to not be true, and so that was postponed. I have since been in touch with the people doing the work, got a copy of the forest plan from Rebecca Longville, the conservation administrator, and we've been assured that what they're doing is in accordance with the plan. It's more drastic than I would have hoped or thought, but it's what they wanted to do, it's what was approved, and the belief of the people doing it, and I presume of the state forest person, is that when they're done, the trees that remain will be in better condition because of having done it. But what that really did was to just mean that we have to put things off. So we've now scheduled the next open house for Saturday, the 28th of October. And I'll cover the timeline in a little more detail in a moment. We're in the process of seeking input from Parks and Rec. We have not yet met with them, but maybe meeting at their next meeting in October, depending when that is, and hope to get their thoughts on it, any inputs on issues they might have, and to discuss with them the kind of administrative and scheduling labor that would be needed and how that might relate to them and what they do. We've also put together a preliminary operations plan. Be happy to share it with anybody. It's preliminary now, it's in draft. But it's basically to try to lay out in advance of the town meeting the kinds of things that the land might be used for and the kinds of things that would need to be done to keep it up. So it would involve driveway maintenance, both graveling and plowing. It would involve grounds maintenance and mowing and things of that sort. It would involve upkeep on whatever buildings it was decided would be retained and that kind of thing. And there are numbers that we've gotten some preliminary estimates on, and would be happy to get further input from knowledgeable people at DPW or Parks or anybody who has experience with these sorts of things as to what those costs would be, and then that would presumably go into the next fiscal year's budget as what an annual thing would be. I might mention that I'm assuming that, I call this a preliminary plan because we don't presume to suggest that this is the way something is going to be, and so my assumption is that if the land is purchased, that some sort of group would be formed or delegated with the responsibility to lay out a detailed plan of how all of this was going to work and how it would all fit together. Now, last week you discussed whether or not an official committee should be formed. I discussed that with the working group. We would prefer to remain as an informal group, but if you decide that it's better to have an official subcommittee, then the members would like to be appointed. Now, we have more people now involved than you would probably want to put on a group, and so if you do decide to form a group, we'd have to talk about how many, how long it's gonna last, whether it's just for the purchase or whether it's a continuing group or whatever it might be. But we would recommend that we stick with an informal group at the moment. So a couple of other points on the timeline. We've scheduled 2 public information sessions at the library. One is on Saturday afternoon, the 30th of September. That's for a couple of hours. And then the other one is on a Tuesday night, the 17th of October. We wanted to have one at night so people who couldn't come on a Saturday could come, and we wanted to have one in the daytime so people who didn't want to go out at night could come at that time. I mentioned the likely negotiation with the Girl Scouts sometime in October. And I mentioned the public walk. That's going to be from 10 until 1 on the 28th, and we're aware that the annual Halloween parade is that afternoon, and so we timed this so that it would end an hour or so before that parade starts. And we're going to encourage people to come to the open house in costume before they go to the Halloween parade so that it can dovetail nicely with that. You will need to determine when the special town meeting is and when the debt exclusion override would be. The important point of the grant that I should have mentioned is that a town meeting vote needs to occur by the 31st of December or the grant is lost. And so the assumption was to try to associate the debt exclusion election with some election you're having, either the one for Selectmen on the 7th of November or the one for State Senator on December 5th. We would recommend the latter because it provides more time, which would allow the town meeting to be either before or after Thanksgiving. But it's obviously your call and the scheduling of the school and other things of that sort. The grant award is usually done in the first half of December. I believe last year they were announced on the 8th or the 9th, something like that. That's just something that whenever the state decides they're going to do it, that they hear from it. If all of that goes well, if the town purchases it, if the grant is awarded, then the closing would be sometime in the early spring of 18, depending on how the funds all come together for us. And the one other thing I should mention, because it will affect the way the town meeting article is written, is that the grant is a reimbursement grant, which means that the town would have to spend the money and send a receipt to a canceled check to the state to say, okay, we have now paid $776 for this, and the state would say, okay, here's your check for $400. So the town meeting article would have to be for the whole thing, even though the net cost after a few months would be lower than that. So that's what I wanted to mention. I'd be happy to address any questions or concerns that anybody has.
Yep, I don't have any questions. Yeah, weird.
So are you asking for us to call a special town meeting?
We would like to have one called, yes. I guess you can't do that tonight because it's not on the agenda, but yes, the request would be to call a special town meeting for that and any other purposes that you wanted. And the article would include debt exclusion. The article would be contingent on getting a grant or equivalent monies. If the grant failed and somebody said, oh, I'll give you $400,000, then obviously you would take that. And it would be contingent on the debt exclusion override. So if the grant fails and there's no other money there, then the purchase would not go through. And if the debt exclusion override fails, the purchase would not go through. But all of that, but the decision on all of that is needed by December, and that's why we really have to have a special town meeting now. And, you know, as I responded to a letter in the paper a couple of weeks ago, we would much rather have waited until next May or whenever to fit in better with other things going on in the town. But this is a opportunity right now and not later than this, and so it's either do it now or don't do it at all.
Well, have you talked to the Girl Scouts about, I mean, we seem to be
Oh, yeah.
moving on their schedule, not necessarily on the town's schedule. And to your
Well-
point,
They,
a single item,
yeah,
potentially a single item.
they were not willing to go into the latter part of 2018. That we suggested that early on, and they didn't like that at all. They were willing to wait until the spring of 18, but they did not want to go further than that.
So when are you meeting with, oh, that hasn't been scheduled yet.
Right, she's away, and so we agreed when we talked with her last week that we would get back in touch again in early October and come up with it, or late September, I think it was. Yeah. But anyway, we would get in touch with her and work out, because what Dawn told them was that most likely there would be that it would be some part of your group, and it might be an executive session or whatever. So we were not specific with her, but she agreed she would come out here, and so she can sit down with whatever group you would decide you would want to do with it.
What I said on the conference call was that there would need to be, I mean, she agreed to come out here. There would need to be, if anything like this is done in executive session, the selectmen strategize, what the approach would be for acceptable pricing, terms and conditions, that type of thing. And then, the other party would come in at that point. But first, you need a strategy plan to decide what it is that you want to do. So I would foresee for the next meeting, an agenda item where the Board of Selectmen vote on calling the special town meeting and setting the date, and probably an executive session at the end of that one to talk about parameters for negotiations. And then, so that you're on the same page. And then, at a meeting in October, probably our first, because I think our first is in the second week of October, and it could be an executive session to have Barbara in, and there would be negotiations at that point. So I think that would be the timeline of events. It seemed to me that anything of this nature certainly would behoove the process to have that sorted out as early as possible. Because why would, if we were to go to special town meeting and the town were to vote for say $776,000 to use a number, only to learn that that's not acceptable to them, that isn't very productive. So it seemed like we should, if we're going to go that route, then that's what we should get that in place. And also the negotiating should be done, as with any other negotiating, it should be done by the selectmen and or their designee. So the first thing would be for the selectmen to set the strategy and decide who exactly would be at the table to do it.
Ken, has either the Park and Rec, or the Conservation Commission, have they discussed sponsoring such an article?
Parks and Rec has not discussed it. I had a discussion with Conservation Commission at the time that they approved allocating money from the Conservation Fund to front the appraisal. We didn't get to the point of really discussing whether they would sponsor the article, but I came away with a sense that they would rather not. But it was never, but we have not had that explicit discussion, so. But we could certainly go back and check with them if we would want, but there has been no discussion at this point with Parks and Rec about it.
Okay, Conservation Commission, have you talked with them, or have they said no in terms of sponsorship?
I have not talked with them specifically about sponsorship. What I talked with them about when I met with them was, would they provide money for the appraisal, and they did that.
Right, we talked about that.
Yeah.
They fronted the
Yeah, and that was, but that was really all. That was early to,
Right.
in fact, at that time, a decision hadn't even been made as to whether we were applying for an open space grant or a park grant.
Mhm.
And so I would imagine that they would have more difficulty in sponsoring the park grant than they would have if it had been an open space grant. But I can certainly try to go back and see them if you think that that would be worthwhile.
Can I add a word about that, Mr. Chairman?
Yeah, can you introduce yourself?
David Wiley of Green Road, about Parks and Rec. They run the town beach. And I swim at the town beach every summer, a dozen times maybe, usually go in the late afternoon and so forth. And I've watched it, I've been doing this for 30 years. And I remember also very well, shortly after I moved to town, town meeting turned down the opportunity to acquire land on the other pond, the one that Camp Virginia is on. I don't remember the details of that, but it was turned down. And subsequently, I guess, the lease from the Boy Scouts of Town Beach came along and that opportunity. But without going into any detail, and I'm in pretty large ignorance about what the Boy Scouts are going to do, but there has been a huge contraction of membership of Boy Scouts, and I know that over the last 10 years, and I know that the area, the district, I'm not sure what the technical name of it is, but the owners of Camp Resolute merged with, that is to say, the Boy Scout division that owns Camp Resolute, merged recently with another one, which owns another camp, as I understand it, down in Plymouth or somewhere like that, which is bigger and better or something than Camp Resolute. So, while it's partly guesswork, there's certainly a good chance that our town beach is in jeopardy. And we are fortunate enough to have this tiny person's park, but that's just a little sliver of land on the pond, and that's not enough for a town beach.
It's 400 feet.
Well, I don't know what the,
Haven't been cleared.
I was down, I took a look at it recently, and it looked pretty narrow to me. There were, on the one hand, there were Boy Scout camp out places, park places, and decks and so forth. On the other hand, it was the Cub Scouts, and it's not an either or. In my opinion, the town needs a bigger beach than we'd be able to produce in Persons Park, which doesn't mean that Persons Park is not valuable as a beach and as a lot of other things, but I don't see that as directly relevant to this. And so what I'm trying to get at is that I saw a recent agenda for Parks and Recreation, and one of the items was increase the number of outhouses or toilet houses. They've only got one, I think, and that speaks for itself in terms of use of the town beach. It's increasing. And if you go down there, it's very touching to me to see all the different types of people who use the town beach. I mean, teaching kids to swim is as critical and important as any community can sponsor. Parents come down with the kids. They have picnics in the evening after the parents get through with their work during the day. People come down and take swims for exercise and because it's so beautiful and so forth. And so there's a definite chance we can lose that. And so it seems to me the most important item about Camp Virginia is its access to the water. And I just want that to be kept in mind. And I would only add that these kind of things, in my opinion, have to be judged on a time scale. These opportunities come along, and there are always pros and cons, but overwhelming all pros and cons, there's a time factor. I think it's how we are stewards of our earth and our habitat, in our town, and we've got to pass on as beautiful a world, as a useful outdoor world as we have. And the way to do that, because population is going to boom, you're going to think in 50-year increments anyway. And so this is an opportunity. And it seems to me that the time factor and the fact that these opportunities come so seldom, and they will be dwindling as the generation pass on. And I hope the Selectmen will keep that in mind. Thanks.
Thank you.
If you follow what Donna's talking about and decide at your next meeting on whether to do the special town meeting, we can certainly attempt to close the loop between now and then with the Conservation Commission to see if they would be interested in sponsoring the article.
Yeah, that would be helpful. I guess there's probably not much more we can deal with this since there's, other than the update.
That's right.
Agenda,
Yeah.
so.
Well, and whether or not you wanted to have an official committee, I think is part of the agenda item, if you want to make a decision one way or the other on that.
It sounded like you're recommending to keep it an informal group, and I'm fine with that.
I'm fine with that.
Okay. All right.
Well, thank you very much, Ken.
Okay.
Thank you.
So now we have the town administrator report.
Thank you. I will pass on the update on Minuteman. I expected to have an update for tonight, but our next meeting is Monday. Next Monday, and we'll be covering quite a bit, I think, at that, so I'm going to hold off on an update until then. Update on the Berlin Road culvert. I am delighted and relieved to announce that I met with the contractor, Chief Nelson and I met with the contractor Wednesday at the culvert site. Chief Nelson's been down there on a daily basis. Culvert looks great. The company has done, I think, an excellent job. And the cleanup was done today. Paving was done Tuesday. Cleanup was done today. Barriers and signage will be removed tomorrow. At some point Friday afternoon, we'll be announcing that the road will be open for traffic. Once we've gotten the word from the contractor, Chief Nelson will be putting the notice up on the department's Facebook page, and Linda will be putting it up on the town hall Facebook page. Certainly will be open by the end of the day Friday, and the buses will be rolling back as normal starting Monday morning. So
Cool.
what I don't know is still the final financial impact. We have not received all of the charges yet. I've asked for at least a rough estimate is what's still to come. I'm still pretty confident that because we were conservative in our budgeting for this culvert, that we should have sufficient funds in the original article, and that we're not going to need to go outside the article for that. So I'm usually conservative and not optimistic by nature when it comes to town projects, but I'm pretty comfortable right now that we'll be able to cover the expense from within the article. Next, on the update on the Town Road Strategic Planning Committee, we've had one more statement of interest. So we have 4 people that have volunteered so far to serve on that. Probably not enough for a full subcommittee, so we're continuing to advertise. In my prep for tonight, I was going back through the work from the previous, the 117 study committee, and they made an observation at the end of the report that I thought I should share with the board, and it comes in the last paragraph. If anyone has a copy of it, it's on page 7. But just to highlight what their recommendation was at the time. The reports we have reviewed display a reasonably consistent outlook on the issues facing Bolton regarding Route 117. Bolton has neither considered these reports thoughtfully nor developed appropriate financial and implementation plans based on the recommendations. They have not been aired in a manner that allows, first, for the collection of public comments from various stakeholders and constituencies in the town, and second, for the elaboration of a comprehensive plan of action with appropriate financial planning. Therefore, in addition to issuing this report in accordance with its charter from the Selectmen, the committee recommends that the town, led by the Selectmen, the Advisory Committee, the Capital Committee, the Department of Public Works, representative town stakeholders, and an outside consultant with documented experience in transportation planning, Massachusetts highway requirements, and highway maintenance, undertake these two efforts forthwith. So, how that works in trying to form the committee that we're forming, the committee could be formed just fine, but I didn't want the Selectmen to be unaware of the recommendation from the previous committee. So if anybody who serves on the previous committee raises that point, then you're aware of it, and you're aware of their recommendation. At this point, we do not have money appropriated for a consultant to do that type of work, but I just wanted you to be aware of it.
I agree with that statement. So how do you integrate that statement into this this planning committee?
It would be difficult to do it with this planning committee because, as I said, since we don't have funds for a consultant,
Yeah.
we could try to task the committee, if we have the right people, the appropriate people with the appropriate background, to go off and do this work, to come back with a recommendation for the Selectmen, and with that as a basis, then we could go forward with an article at an annual town meeting for some amount of funds to perform engineering that would support, to perform engineering design that would support the recommendations of this committee if the Selectmen chose to accept it. So
one of the first tasks of this group would be finding that person.
no, we would not have them do that. That would fall
I
under.
mean, not finding, but kind of the costs related to
That would be
that type
helpful.
of consultant.
That would be helpful, because we would still have to go off and do a request for proposals. Which is not required with engineering, but for something specialized like this, I think would be a prudent thing to do. But we would need the committee to come back with recommendations for what should be done. And then, based on the plan design, then we know what type of engineering support that we're looking for, and then funding recommendation for town meeting would come from that. So yes, you're right.
So we have 4 volunteers, and we just need 1 more for a...
I would say we need at least 1 more to get to 5. I mean, you generally, yeah.
Well, actually, I think based upon that, it's saying that you need involvement of someone from the select board, advisory, and the DPW. So I would say we need to have those individuals involved as well. But I would also recommend, until we get another DPW director in, we shouldn't be moving forward with anything until that individual is on board, because that individual is going to be an integral part of that group. So,
Well, I think that after we get the funds for a consultant, then I think we would bring in somebody, include a representative from advisory, selectmen, and DPW.
no, it's saying that they need to be involved in the beginning, and I think that's the way it should go.
Well, I think there's a little bit of overlap. We have the Complete Streets Committee that's kind of doing similar work and has members from lots of different committees, including, selectmen. There's, the police chief has attended. So, I think we've stalled on this for a long time, so I don't want to kind of wait.
So as I said, I mean, you could, you certainly have options, but I would say 4 people is not large enough for a subcommittee. I think you at least want 5, and then it's, up to the selectmen if you want involvement from advisory, capital planning, Board of Selectmen, DPW early on in the process. If you want it later on in the process, that's certainly for you to determine.
But I think at this stage it should be earlier than later.
So we'll keep advertising, and hopefully we'll get 5 members and they can get started.
So I'll give you another update on the 28th, and hopefully we have, we've attracted at least one more person by then. And finally, update on the potential changes to the EMT cadet program. I want to keep this at a high level because I don't want to have people overly concerned where they may not need to be. And I just want to do, I'm just going to do a brief synopsis, and a synopsis of the program as well for people who may not be aware of it. But the Cadet Emergency Medical Technician, which is what EMT stands for, it consists of students who will complete a state-approved college-level EMT course and pass written and practical state examinations to be certified cadet EMTs at age 16 and a half. Since state regulations stipulate that EMTs have to be 18 years of age, a special projects waiver was approved by the state's Office of Emergency Medical Services, also known as OEMS, to allow certification under the age of 18 and has been renewed every 5 years for the past 30 years. The Neshoba Regional School District and the Town of Bolton split program costs annually. The Neshoba Cadet EMT program is a 3-year program. Year 1 consists of a twice-weekly National Registry approved EMT class for students who will be 16 and a half years of age by the time they complete the curriculum, and culminates in eligibility to take the National Registry written and practical assessment examination in order to attain cadet EMT status. The course and examination are identical to standard adult EMT courses. The Year 2 and Year 3 programs consist of an educational curriculum and clinical service opportunity. Once weekly continuing education and training classes are required for cadet EMTs who have successfully completed the examination process, and also for cadet candidates who are awaiting the examination process. In addition, these teenage students provide medical coverage for high school sporting events, in-school emergencies, and emergency ambulance response from 7 a.m. until 5 p.m. during the school year. A tiered experienced crew responds to all 911 emergencies during the service hours and is comprised of a minimum of 2 certified cadet EMTs along with 2 additional cadet EMTs or cadet candidates, as well as an adult EMT. We've had the program for 30 years. It's been very successful. Never had any incidents that I'm aware of. I think it's actually a model program. Bolton and Harvard are really the only towns that are doing this, at least in this area at this point. And the issue on the table is whether or not the state is going to agree to continue to issue another waiver. And there was a very large meeting in Harvard a few weeks ago that I attended, Margie attended. We had four EMT cadets there. I wish I had their names because they were spectacular in their presentation and the way they conducted themselves. The people who conduct our training was there. We had a lot of people there. It was a large conference room with an enormous conference room table, and every seat was taken. And someone from the state was there to hear our concerns, our views, talk about how best to deal with this. There's a school of thought that perhaps the regulations, the state regulations, could be updated to allow for something like this and eliminate the waiver process. So the person from the state was certainly receptive to all ideas. We're going to keep on working to lobby the state to sort this out. So I don't want to create the impression that the program is in jeopardy or being shut down. But that being said, the ultimate goal is to try to maintain what we've got as easily as possible and as best we can. And the people involved, including me, will do whatever we can to influence that. And I'll give the board periodic updates going forward as this evolves.
Okay. Thank you, Tom.
Mr. Chairman, is there a timeline for when the waiver's going to run out and then we need to know whether it can continue?
Well, that's what we're working on now to establish that.
Date? When does the waiver run out?
They haven't decided whether or not they're going to renew the waiver we have now.
But when does it run out?
that's up to the state. I mean,
No, there's a 5, it
That's
it's
a
a
I
5
see what you're
days.
saying.
Actually,
It would,
go ahead.
I believe it would, it's either, it either has already expired or will expire this year. I'm not certain on the timing. But it would not, there would, definitely wouldn't be anything in place beyond June of next year if we didn't have something in place.
Thank you.
And what we are continuing at the high school level, we are continuing with the classes. Nothing's been changed. Kids have been accepted and they're moving forward.
I think it's a great program, my son would.
No, I think it's an outstanding program.
Thank you, Don. So moving on to Board of Selectmen business, we have an appointment to the Nashua Wild and Scenic River Study Group. We have Rona Balco has volunteered.
Yeah, and Rona couldn't be here tonight, but she has expressed her interest in serving on the committee.
And the selectman from Harvard came and spoke to us about
Yes.
this
Yes.
previously.
Mhm.
Yep.
Al Futterman, yes.
Yep.
Lucy.
I'm fine with it.
Me too. I'd like to make a motion to appoint Rona Balca to the Nashua Wild Scenic River Study Group.
I'll second that.
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Now we have Police Chief Nelson, a discussion on the draft of the school resource officer rules and regulations.
Good evening, everyone.
Hello.
Chief, how are you?
Good to see you.
It's good to see you.
Hey, Chief.
So right after the selectmen meeting that you sent me on the mission to get this started, I sent a message out to the Mass Chiefs of Police, and they sent out a message to all the chiefs in the state, asking them to send me their roles and responsibilities for the school resource officer. I got back about a dozen, a little less than a dozen, and what I did is I compiled pretty much, if one didn't have it, I added it to ours. So what you have in front of you is what I've been able to show the principal, because I was able to meet him 3 or 4 days before school started. And the school superintendent has taken a look at it, but she hasn't given me her official. So far, she likes it, and there hasn't been any changes, so we're back here if you have any comments, suggestions, or changes.
Has this been reviewed by town council?
This has not been
Okay.
reviewed by the town council.
All right. I mean, I looked through it, I mean, I think it looks fine. Yeah, I think it's, you know, to your point, it's sort of a compendium of everything you've gotten so far, and it kind of outlines what we kind of sort of knew already anyway. It just kind of formalizes it. And I think, you know, I think it's good as a working document, and if there are tweaks that need to be done along the line, you know, I have no problem with tweaking it.
Yep.
And if as long as the principal and the superintendent are happy with it, I'm fine with it as well.
Yes, I agree with Stan, but the one issue for me is I'm not seeing any of the language that I proposed at that last meeting in this document. So I'd just like to work on getting some of those kind of protections that, you know, I listed at that last meeting, get some of those in there. So that
We have copies of that for tonight.
Well, is
Yeah, I
that
think you're
is
right.
that for the other document, or is it?
Well, we discussed it for the MOU, but it seemed to get, it's not showing, those additions aren't showing up, those kind of what I would call protections aren't showing up in the MOU, and they're not showing up in this. And I think town council said that maybe it should be in a separate document, I guess, like this. Some of those protections did come from other towns' memorandum of understanding, so it doesn't matter too much to me which one it's in, but I would like to see, you know, the language of those protections that we reviewed.
Perhaps what would be easiest for you is, I know that you had a copy of that back in the spring. I think if you don't, we can certainly give it to you, and then you can take that, try to meld it into this document, you know, as you see fit, you know, as how you can fit it in, and then bring a revised document back to the next meeting. Would that be helpful?
Yeah, that'd be great.
Sure, if you can forward me that document,
We
I
definitely
can
have it.
take a look at it.
Yeah, thank you for doing this.
But there are no issues with this document? I mean, there's nothing objectionable in here?
Yeah, yeah, nothing
Okay.
major. Just-
Okay.
Okay, so we'll bring that back for the meeting on the 28th.
Okay.
And just as a reminder, before I lose the thought, as far as the agenda for the 28th, remember, we've got Kate Hogan and the individual from the state coming in to do about a 45-minute presentation on the CPA.
And will they be first on the
Yeah, we'll
agenda?
put them as early as possible.
Okay.
Unless we have a poll hearing, they'll be first.
Great. Good. So we'll move on to, we have recommendations from the police chief to appoint Jeffrey B. White and Maxwell J. Bressi as reserve officers.
Max and Jeff.
Well,
Max
Bressi,
sir.
John.
Pleasure.
Nice to meet you.
Max
Pleasure.
Dressy, sir. Thanks.
Pleasure. Well, we were very fortunate to have over 60 applications come in for the 4 positions. The lieutenant and I weeded those down to about 30, and we interviewed those 30 for the first interview. And we gave the committee, the hiring committee for the reserve officer, 12 to 15 names, and they came up with 4 names. We do have 4 candidates, 2 already tonight. They've completed their background, their physical, their psychological, nuts to bolts. They've been checked out pretty well, and we've got 2 very qualified candidates here. They both have the Reserve Academy already. I'm going to do general so that you know they're both employed. One is a Fitchburg State University police officer, full-time, and the other is a Bentley?
Correct.
Bentley. I was going to say Brandeis, and I said, no, it's Bentley. Bentley College as a dispatcher, communications officer. Okay, so they're both full-time there, and they've got plenty of time to come out here and help us out as much as possible.
Cool. Excellent.
So if you have any questions, feel free to grill them as best you
Well,
can.
I looked at your resumes, and they're very impressive.
Thank you.
Yeah.
We've got college degrees, we've got a bachelor's and associates in
Mhm.
criminal justice. So I think we've got very qualified candidates that will fit in very well here in Bolton.
Because we're not really sleeping with the town. We're far from it, right? No, super, that's great. No, I think it's great. We appreciate you stepping up and wanting to serve. Lord knows we need the extra help.
Happy to be here. Thank you.
Good. And you'll see me, I work in town, and I'm always stopping and saying hi to all the officers, so.
Look forward to it.
You'll get to know me pretty well.
Very good.
He also has a sports car that he likes to drive around.
Thankfully, only one, so far.
So do we need a motion to
Yes,
approve?
please.
Yes.
I'd like to make a motion to approve Chief Nelson's recommendations to appoint Jeffrey White and Maxwell Bressi as reserve officers.
I'll second that.
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Welcome.
Gentlemen, welcome.
Thank you very much. Thank you, sir. Pleasure.
Nice meeting you, sir.
Have a good evening.
Thank you, sir. You too.
Pleasure.
Thank you, sir. Great. Congratulations.
So when are you gonna start?
Tonight?
Tonight.
A little late.
All right.
Thank you.
All right, let's get him suited up.
All right, thank you.
Thank you very
Can you
much.
show them which car is mine in the parking lot?
Stan is a sports car?
Yes, I do. Well, actually, it's a muscle car.
A muscle?
And now we have the minutes.
No, I'll get them out. It's been a little hectic, but I have them all in a folder on my machine. I'll take care of that.
So I'd like to make a motion to adjourn.
No.
Okay.
I'd like you to make a motion to adjourn.
I'd like to make a motion to go into executive session pursuant to MGL C30A 21A6 to consider the purchase, exchange, lease,
Good night, everybody.
or value of real estate, as the chair finds that an open meeting may have a detrimental effect on the negotiating position of the public body. The board will not reconvene to open session.
I'll second that.
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Keith
Here.
Wasaki.
Yes.